Hello and welcome to Pitboards and Podiums with me, Maya Westwick. Today is F1 for Beginners episode 5, so buckle up and let's talk F1. Alright guys, so as I said, today we are doing the 5th episode in my F1 for Beginners series, and we are going to be talking about the points scoring system in Formula 1. So for those of you who don't know how the points scoring system works, hopefully by the end of this episode you should know everything you need to know about how the championships are decided, all of that based on the positions that the drivers finish the races. Because once you know, it is very, very basic, but I know as someone who is new to the sport, it can be very intimidating to get your head around sometimes, but that's what we're here for. The current point system has been in place since 2019 with the reintroduction of the fastest lap point, but then the rest of the point system has been in place since 2010. There have been quite a few previous iterations of it. I'm not going to go back into like the 1980s point system and things like that, but basically prior to 1991, not all of the points scored in a season would actually count towards the championships, towards the drivers or the constructors championships. There was loads of different rulings around it and just different variations of it, but from 1991 every point scored in a race throughout the entire season counts towards both the drivers and the constructors championship, unless of course someone gets disqualified or if they get like some sort of points deduction in terms of a punishment for something, things like that. But generally, every single point scored counts towards the championships now. Prior to this becoming a thing in 1991, it could sometimes get a little bit confusing because there was just a lot of different variations and different rulings, and it was just not very consistent. So the current points scoring system for a standard race weekend is that positions 1 through 10 at the race finish earn points, 11 and below do not. That is where the driver is classified as finishing, not necessarily where they actually cross the line, because of course, if drivers have got 5-second penalties post-race, anything like that, if there's any reason that they have to be dropped down a position from when they actually cross the line, of course they're not going to get the points for where they cross the line. They get the points for where they're classified. If you finish within the top 10, so you are a points scorer, and you get the fastest lap of the race, then you'll get an extra point for fastest lap. However, if you were classified like P15 and you had fastest lap, you would not get that point. Even if, again, you'd cross the line in P9 but you had a penalty that dropped you down there, you would not get that point because you're not classed as a points finisher. The way that the points are distributed within the top 10 is that first position gets 25 points, second gets 18, third gets 15, fourth gets 12, fifth gets 10, sixth gets 8, seventh gets 6, eighth gets 4, ninth gets 2, and 10th gets 1. And then of course, whoever out of those 10 manages to achieve the fastest lap, if it is within those 10, they will get one more point as well. Previous iterations have included awarding points to the top 5, 6, and 8 finishers, but now we've got a nice, even, round 10 cars get those points. When Sir Lewis Hamilton joined the sport in 2007, that was obviously the most recent points system before this update. So that was between 2003 and 2009, I believe. And at that time, it was first position gets 10 points, second gets 8, third gets 6, fourth gets 5, fifth gets 4, sixth gets 3, seventh gets 2, and eighth gets 1. So obviously a lot less points were available each season, especially compared to now, because the winner of the race would get less points than the top 4 drivers. Like, they'd get what the 5th place finisher now would get in terms of points. Despite that, Lewis Hamilton holds the record for the most points in a rookie season with 109 points, and I went through his finishes for his rookie season in Formula 1, and I worked out with the current point system how many points he would have scored if the current point system was in place when he set that record, and he would have scored 267 points using the current point system in his rookie season. That is more than any non-Red Bull driver scored last year. Just to put that into context with you, literally the only drivers last year that scored more than 267 points throughout the championship were the 2 Red Bull drivers. No one else, not even Lewis himself, scored that many points. And that's bearing in mind that, of course, they had less races then as well. So it kind of really puts into perspective for you just how amazing that record of his is. I feel like that's something that, especially because Oscar was having such a good year last year, people were talking about him toppling Lewis with his record and all of that because he got up to like the 90s in points. But when you put them into the same point system, you can kind of see why it was such a big deal that Lewis had done that. In 2014, to try and spice things up a bit, Bernie Ecclestone decided that they were going to award double points for just the last race of the season, which was greatly criticised. Sebastian Vettel called it absurd, and rightfully so, and it only happened in the 2014 season. It did not happen again because why? It's just that's purely for entertainment. That's nothing to do with any sporting value. So, Of course, we don't just have standard race weekends now. We do also have sprint weekends. And the way that points were awarded as of the 2023 season in the sprint weekends, I'm going to say as of 2023 because this might change. They are looking at how they can improve the sprint format, and they like to leave that kind of thing, that kind of information quite late in terms of when we find out what's actually going to happen. So I can't tell you that it's going to be this way this year, but this is how it was last year. So, it might be the same, it might not. So the way that it was as of last year was that the top 8 finishers in a sprint race scored points, with first place scoring 8 points, going down to 8th place scoring 1 point. Obviously, when sprints were initially introduced in 2021, they counted towards qualifying as well as that, and it set the grid order for the main race on the Sunday, but then that was scrapped, and they are kind of looking at how they can change things with the sprint format. So like I said, I can't say that it's going to be exactly the same this year, but it might be, so it's worth you knowing. So Lewis Hamilton holds the record for the most career points in Formula 1 with a current total of 4,639.5 points, and Ferrari have got the most constructors points in Formula 1 with 9,672, which is quite a lot of points. And obviously that takes into consideration the fact that the point system prior to Lewis Hamilton being in the sport awarded even less points. So someone like Michael Schumacher, for example, has a relatively low points total, but if you were to go back and work everything out with the current points system for everyone, Lewis would still be at the top, but Michael would have a lot more points. And quite a lot of Formula 1 drivers would have a lot more points than they actually statistically do. The regulations around the awarding of points were changed after the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix. That was because obviously that was a very controversial race where no racing actually took place. It was literally 2 laps behind a safety car, so nobody could make up any positions, nobody could lose any positions unless someone crashed. There was no chance for there to be any racing, but because the regulations at the time stated that as long as the race leader had completed 2 full laps of the race and they hadn't completed more than 75% of the race, anything completed between that 2 laps and 75% of the race would mean that half points would be awarded, which of course was very controversial because there was no racing and points were awarded in a championship battle based on qualifying positions effectively. So since then that has been revised to say that it must be a minimum of 2 laps without a safety car or virtual safety car intervention. So 2 full laps of actual racing, and points are allocated depending on the percentage of laps completed rather than just being between 2 laps and 75%, you get half points. There's kind of like tiers to it now. So the way that it's worded in Article 6.5 of last year's sporting regulations is, if a race is suspended in accordance with Article 57 and cannot be resumed, points for each title will be awarded in accordance with the following criteria. A. No points will be awarded if the leader has completed less than 2 laps. B. In each case detailed in Article 6.5 C, D, E and F, no points will be awarded unless a minimum of 2 laps have been completed by the leader without a safety car and or virtual safety car intervention. C. If the leader has completed 2 laps but less than 25% of the scheduled race distance, points will be awarded in accordance with column 1 of the table below. And that column in the sporting regulations reads that first place will get 6 points, second place will get 4, third place will get 3, fourth will get 2, and fifth will get 1. Nobody else will get any points. D. If the leader has completed 25% but less than 50% of the scheduled race distance, points will be awarded in accordance with column 2 of the table below. And that column reads that first place will get 13 points, second place 10, third 8, fourth 6, fifth 5, sixth 4, seventh 3, eighth 2, and ninth 1, with nothing for anybody below that. E. If the leader has completed 50% but less than 75% of the scheduled race distance, points will be awarded in accordance with column 3 of the table below. That's 19 for first position, 14 for second, 12 for third, 10 for fourth, 8 for fifth, 6 for sixth, 4 for seventh, 3 for eighth, 2 for ninth, and 1 for 10th. So, of course, in terms of 9th and 10th, they're actually getting 4 points there, instead of us ending up with what we ended up after Belgium, with people having half points. And then F. If the leader has completed 75% or more of the scheduled race distance, 4 points will be awarded. So that is everything that I was going to say about the points system in Formula 1 and how it currently works. Obviously, if there are any changes to that in the 2024 sporting regulations, I can talk about them then, because we don't know what those sporting regulations are yet. But I can't see any reason, other than with the sprint weekends where something might change, I can't see any reason that anything would change, unless they're just trying to do more things for the entertainment value, so who knows. I'm now going to move on to kind of the glossary section of the F1 for Beginners series. And I've only got 6 terms for you today, so this should be quite fast. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is what the plank is. So the plank on a Formula 1 car, you could hear it referred to as the floor, you could hear it referred to as a skid block. What it is literally a plank of wood. It's a hard wooden strip that is fitted front to back, the entire length of the car, down the middle of the underside of all of the cars. That is to check that they're not being run too close to the track surface, which then of course is apparent if the wood is excessively worn down. So one of the scrutineering checks that is done on the cars after the races is seeing how much wear the planks have, and there's certain parameters that they have to fit within, and if they don't, then the cars are going to be disqualified. And that is what happened to Sir Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc at the US Grand Prix last year. Both of them, after a very long weekend, it was a sprint weekend, on a very bumpy track, on a very abrasive track, their planks were too worn. They were too worn, so that meant that they were disqualified from the race, because as harsh as it sounds and as harsh as it may be, technically they were not within the parameters of what was allowed in the sport. Pole position is the first place on the starting grid, and that is awarded to the driver who recorded the fastest lap time in qualifying. So the drivers will get a pole position award if they set the fastest lap time. Not everyone who gets the pole position award actually ends up starting on pole, because if they have a penalty, of course, that means they have to start the race from however many grid positions further back, or from the pit lane, or from wherever. But they will still have the award for pole position, because they did, in qualifying, get the fastest lap and classify as first. They just won't start there if they've got a penalty. A powertrain is the entire system that powers the car. So you might hear, for example, Red Bull powertrains, because Red Bull ended their deal with Honda to make their own engine and become their own engine supplier, and then it's basically still Honda that's actually doing the work. But the powertrain itself is this entire system that powers the car. It comprises of the power unit, or like the engine, the 2 energy recovery systems that I've spoken about before, the MGUK and the MGUH, and the energy store, which again I've spoken about before as well. But it is effectively the entire system that works with the purpose of giving the car power. That's what the powertrain is. Ride height is the height between the track's surface and the floor of the car. So this again is linking to what I was saying about the plank. If the ride height is too low, that means the car is being run too close to the track surface. They can get advantages in terms of downforce and things like that for doing that, but it is illegal. Like, there's a minimum distance between the track and the floor of the car that they have to abide to, and they can't go any closer than that. And that again is shown a lot of the time by the plank being too worn. A rumble strip is a bumpy, saw-toothed strip of curbing that's usually found on the exit of a corner to warn the driver where the edge of the track is, because sometimes, especially when a driver's looking at the apex and things like that, they aren't always 100% aware of where the edge of the track is and of track limits and all of that. Obviously, when you go over something that's like bumpy and saw-toothed, like, you feel that, and then they know that that's where they are. The same as how on a normal road there are like the paint strips that go up to a roundabout to help you know how close you are to the roundabout. Things like that. It's like a sensory aid for the driver, effectively, so they don't have to look at where their tyres are and where the edge of the track is at the exit of every single corner, because they can feel it. And the safety car is the official course vehicle that is called from the pits to run in front of the leading car in the race in the event of any sort of incident or problem that requires the cars to be slowed down and bunched together. That is driven by Bernd Mailander. He has driven the car for years and years and years and years, and he basically controls the pace of the pack. He will slow the entire field down to make it so that they're not driving such fast speeds, and that it's a lot safer for marshals and officials to be out on track doing whatever they need to do. And he also does this to back everyone together so that there can be periods of time, if there's an incident at turn 13 somewhere, all of the cars will go past that turn 13 in succession, all behind each other, and then there will be another, however long the lap is, like another minute and a half of no cars, so that the officials and marshals can be going across the track and doing whatever they need to do before the cars turn up again. So the safety car is very important. Obviously, we do also have a virtual safety car, which is just to kind of neutralise the race, not to bunch everyone up. In recent years, we've had Mercedes and Aston Martin safety cars, like in terms of what the actual car is. And we've seen a lot of the safety car in recent years. But yeah, it is an official course vehicle that is there to ensure everyone's safety. That's what it's there for. It's ensuring the marshal's safety, it's ensuring the driver's safety. You know, if there's cranes on track, I mean, there shouldn't be cranes on track when drivers are on track, but it happens. All of that sort of thing. The safety car is there to try and make it as safe as possible. So that is everything that I was going to discuss today. I feel like I got through that quite quickly. If anyone has any questions or anything, do let me know. I will at some point do an infographic on the TikTok again about the point system. I know I've been a little bit behind on infographics with like last week's tyres and stuff like that, but I will get to it and I will post that on there, so you've got like a visual aid as well if you want it. And thank you very much for listening. I hope you have enjoyed the episode. I will be back in your ears very, very soon, in a couple of days, with an episode on Carlos Sainz. So do come back for that. But if you have enjoyed today's episode, please like, rate, comment, subscribe, share the podcast. I would really, really appreciate it. And come back for my next episode. So thank you again for listening. I do really, really appreciate it. And I will be back in a couple of days. Bye!